The kid everyone called too much, too intense, too curious, too sensitive, too stubborn, often turned out to be one of the most perceptive people in the room once they grew up. That's not a coincidence. And if any part of you just felt a quiet recognition hearing that, stay with this. Because what psychology reveals about why it happens is something most people never fully examine, and the part we're building toward, about what this actually does to a person long term, is something almost nobody talks about. Welcome to Decoded Psychology, where we go beneath the surface of human behavior and uncover the quiet forces shaping who you've become, who you love, and why you do what you do. Here's where most people's understanding breaks down. When they picture a highly intelligent child, they see the movie version calm, composed, sitting in the front row, effortlessly impressing every teacher in the building. But that image isn't just incomplete. It actively misleads the people responsible for these kids. Cognitive psychologists have documented for decades that high intellectual ability frequently arrives packaged with something called asynchronous development. What that means, please, actually is that a child's intellect can be running years ahead of their emotional and social development simultaneously. A 7-year-old reasoning at the level of a 12-year-old, but still emotionally, physiologically, neurologically 7. That gap is invisible to most adults. And invisible gaps create the worst kind of misunderstanding because there's nothing obvious to point at. So what does that child actually look like from the outside? They ask questions at the dinner table that nobody wants to field at 6 p.m. They push back on rules they find logically inconsistent, not because they're defiant, but because the inconsistency is genuinely bothering them. They disengage in classrooms that move at a pace their brain finished with 20 minutes ago. And the adults around them, loving adults, well-meaning adults, reach for the available labels. Difficult, hyperactive, oversensitive, defiant. The labels feel accurate because the behaviors are real. The problem is that the story beneath the behavior never gets read. Here's the neuroscience that makes this sharper. The prefrontal cortex, the region governing decision-making, reasoning, and impulse control, develops slowly. For all children, that's normal. But in high 1Q kids, there's a specific mismatch that creates real internal pressure. Their analytical processing is accelerated. Their emotional regulation hasn't kept pace. So they think deeply, feel intensely, and simultaneously lack the neurological tools to manage what they're experiencing. The best analogy I've encountered for this isn't a clean one, but it's honest. It's like running advanced software on hardware that isn't quite ready for it. The system overheats. Not because something is broken, because the load is genuinely too high for the current infrastructure. And then there's the social dimension, which is where the misunderstanding cuts the deepest. This is the part I want you to hold on to, because we're coming back to it. Polish-American psychologist Kazimierz Dąbrowski spent years studying gifted individuals and described what he called overexcitabilities, a heightened intensity in how certain people experience the world. Not just intellectually, emotionally, perceptually, physically. These children notice more than their peers notice. They absorb more. They feel more, and that capacity, which sounds like a gift in the abstract, becomes genuinely overwhelming in a room full of people who are not wired the same way. A teacher sees a child who cannot stop interrupting. A parent sees a child who cries over something small. What's actually happening is that this child is processing a volume of information that would overwhelm most adults, and they haven't yet developed the filters to manage it. The behavior is the overflow. The behavior is not the problem. Now, and I want to pause here, deliberately consider how often we do this as adults. How often do we look at a behavior and judge the behavior without ever asking what internal experience is producing it? Because here's what the research doesn't let us look away from. When high IQ children are consistently mislabeled, it doesn't just slide off them. It shapes them. A landmark longitudinal study on gifted children found that a significant portion reported feeling fundamentally isolated from their peers from very early ages. Not occasionally lonely, structurally different. And a striking number of these children developed a specific adaptive behavior in response. They began hiding their intelligence as a social survival strategy, playing dumb, holding back. Check. Shrinking the parts of themselves that made other people uncomfortable. That's not a temporary adjustment. That becomes psychological architecture. Those adaptive patterns built in childhood into careers, into relationships. The child who learned that being fully themselves created distance starts becoming an adult who performs a smaller version of themselves by default and often doesn't know why. The developmental paradox at the center of all this is worth sitting with. The very qualities that give these children their depth of questioning, the intensity, the refusal to accept easy answers are precisely the qualities that make childhood harder for them. Intelligence in early life is not always the obvious gift it appears from the outside. Sometimes it arrives wearing the disguise of a problem, and the social piece layers onto this in ways that are genuinely painful. Children are wired for belonging. They want to feel normal, resonant, part of something. But a child operating on a different intellectual frequency often struggles to find that resonance with age mates. Conversations feel shallow, not out of arrangement, or by edge, audience, but out of genuine incompatibility. Play patterns feel unstimulating. Over time, many gifted children experience what researchers describe as a quiet loneliness, not from lacking social skills, but from the difficulty of finding genuine connection when your inner world runs at a different register than everyone around you. There's also a layer of misidentification that the system consistently fails to correct. Research estimates that a significant portion of twice exceptional children, those who are both highly gifted and carry a learning difference like ADHD or dyslexia, are never identified as gifted at all. Only the challenge gets seen. The potential underneath it goes unrecognized entirely. The infrastructure designed for the average misses them. What all of this adds up to, when you step back far enough to see the whole picture, is something simple and profound at once. The child who exhausted the adults around them. The one who questioned everything, felt everything, never quite fit the mold. They were not a problem to be managed. They were a complex inner world waiting for someone to be willing to understand it. And for more than a few people watching this, her sentence didn't land as a description of someone else. It landed as a memory of yourself. Psychology doesn't tell us that high intelligence makes childhood easier. The evidence honestly points the other way. But it does tell us something worth carrying. Behavior always has a story beneath it. The children who seemed hardest to understand were often the ones who most needed someone to look one layer deeper than the behavior and find the person underneath it. If this kind of thinking is what draws you, there's a whole world of it on this channel. Subscribe to Decoded Psychology every week. We go deeper into the forces shaping who you are and why. And next week, we're looking at something that connects directly to everything we just explored. Why so many highly perceptive adults spend their lives feeling like they're performing a version of themselves rather than actually living as one. That one's going to hit close to home.